What's up, people? Welcome to the video and welcome back, members of the Tang Gang. I'm Tangy Nacho and today we have another Overwatch League recap. This past week was Season 2, Stage 2, Week 4, the Dallas homestand. And my god, the hype was off the charts in Dallas. The Fuel Stadium is absolutely massive and it was completely sold out, which gives me hope and makes me really excited for next season when all the teams have their own stadiums and I can actually go to a game or two nearby. But the best part for me was probably the walkouts. All the Dallas Fuel players got their names announced and they walked through the crowd on their own. Mickey came out first wielding the flag. It was just super cool to watch and made me really hyped for the matches. And speaking of the matches, they only sent 8 teams out to Dallas, so each of them played each other twice for a total of 8 games this week. If you missed some of the games or you just don't really remember what happened, I've got you covered, so let's jump into this. First up was the Paris Eternal versus the London Spitfire. Coming into the week, people were talking about whether or not London is actually a top 4 team, considering they were one of the only 4 teams undefeated at the time. And with this match against Paris, they proved that they definitely have the capability to play top 4 level Overwatch in my opinion. On map 1, Busan, they won 2-0. Map 2, Anubis won 2-1. Kings Row, London won again 5-4 to seal the victory. And they capitalized the 4-0 on Junkertown with a 3-1 win. Now obviously Paris isn't like a top 5 team or anything. We haven't seen London play against any of the really high level teams in the league this stage, but they're definitely in the upper half of the middle of the line teams, so this was a pretty big win for London. And it's not like Paris played bad either. Soon was playing really well, Gray was doing good on support, more specifically in the first half of the match than the second half, but the Spitfire just have that clutch factor that not many other teams seem to be able to replicate. As I said, the match ended up 4-0 for London. Moving on to the next match, we had the Hangzhou Spark versus the Chengdu Hunters. This battle for China ended up being a lot closer than the last one, with all the maps being decided by only 1 point. And like every Hunters match, it was quite enjoyable to watch. They started off on Busan where both teams looked pretty even, but Hangzhou ended up taking it 2-1. Then Hangzhou took Temple 3-2, which put them up 2-0 going into the half. But honestly, it was still pretty close and I had high hopes for a reverse sweep. And my hopes were fueled on Blizzard World when Chengdu first held and then was able to push the card a little bit further to take the victory 2-1. This was largely in part to some awesome McCree play from Yang Xiaolong, which you always love to see. And then Junkertown went down to the wire, but it ended up 5-4 for Hangzhou and the match ended up 3-1. Overall, I really like both of these teams. I think Hangzhou is finally starting to show us the team that we all expected going into the season, and Chengdu is just so unpredictable with the random comps that they play that I think they could really stand a chance against any team. Next up was our first Texas team, the Houston Outlaws versus the Seoul Dynasty. And this one went pretty much as everyone planned, but Houston showed more life than they have as of late. They actually took the first round on Oasis and I got hyped that they might take a map off Seoul, but then they ended up losing 2-1. On Paris it went 4-3 for Seoul. On Blizzard World 3-0 they got first held as always, and on Rialto it was 4-3 for Seoul, leaving the final match score at 4-0. Other than Blizzard World, you could say this series was actually decently competitive. The problem with Houston is that they're just so bad at goats and they try to do other things and it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, and as soon as it stops working they switch back to goats. Maybe it's a confidence issue or maybe that's what the coaching staff is telling them to do, but either way it's not working and that's pretty clear. On the other side of things, Fitz absolutely popped off. Jaehong had a great game as he has been as of late, and Seoul got a well-deserved victory over the Houston Outlaws. Then ending off Saturday was the actual first home game, the Dallas Fuel taking on the LA Valiant. Now obviously up to this point LA Valiant has had home advantage for basically all of their matches, and as Space said in an interview, they were rightfully scared coming to someone else's stadium. Not to mention their poor performance in this season thus far must have had them feeling really nervous, and you could definitely tell based on the scoreboard. Oasis went 2-0 for Dallas, Anubis went 2-1 for Dallas, Eichenwald went 2-1 for Dallas. It was looking really bad for Valiant. But they did make it competitive on Junkertown, bringing the score to 5-4, but it ended up going for Dallas anyway. So while it might have sucked for the Valiant, it was really awesome for the Fuel to win their first ever home game 4-0. The screaming crowd at their home court was absolutely an advantage, and all their players played exceedingly well in this match. OG was going on an absolute rampage, Note was playing like one of the best divas in the league, AKM was popping off as always, Zachary was putting up good numbers, Unko, I mean everybody was just playing so well. It makes me really excited to see how the home court advantage will come into play next season when everybody gets to play home games. And then on Sunday we had the Hangzhou Spark versus the Paris Eternal, and this was actually an incredibly close, super awesome match. Just like when Hangzhou played Chengdu earlier, it was 2 middle of the line teams that were very evenly matched, and that makes for the best Overwatch in my opinion. Other than maybe San Francisco Shock versus Vancouver Titans, but you know, that's a whole nother level. These guys were neck and neck the entire entire series, and I honestly didn't know who was gonna win until it actually happened. First map, Lijiang Tower went 2-1 for Hangzhou. Temple of Anubis went 3-2 for Paris, so going into the half it was tied 1-1. Map 3, Eichenwald went 6-5 for Paris. Map 4 went 3-2 for Hangzhou, so now we were tied 2-2 and we had to play an overtime match. They went to Busan and Hangzhou kicked it up to 9th gear, shredding through Paris and taking a 2-0 victory. We had Rhea and Soon on the Tracer going head to head. Godsby had an absolutely insane match, and honestly he was the difference maker for me. But I think they gave player of the match to Gushui, who also played really well as always. But either way, it just came down to a few mistakes from Paris that Hangzhou was able to capitalize on and take the victory. It ended up 3-2 for the Spark. Next we had the Chengdu Hunters versus the London Spitfire. Every week of Overwatch League needs its amazing upset. Last week we had Atlanta over New York, and this week we have Chengdu over London Spitfire. Map 1 Oasis was pretty close, although Jinmu was putting out crazy damage numbers compared to his opponents. Map 2, Paris, went 4-5 for London, so it was tied 1-1 going into the half. Then Chengdu got a first hold on London on Eichenwald and won 3-0, and closed out the match with another first hold on Rialto and won 2-1. Think about this. Just a minute ago I was talking about how London Spitfire looked like a top 4 team in the league, and now today they're getting first held twice in a row by the Chengdu Hunters. London was playing some weird compositions. I'm not sure if they practiced these weird compositions in order to try and counter Chengdu's crazy playstyle, but it absolutely didn't work. Throughout the whole match, Jinmu and Elsa were slaughtering everybody on London, and they ended up winning the match 3-1 for the Hunters. Then we had the match between the two teams that faced off against the Texans yesterday, the Seoul Dynasty versus the LA Valiant. And I had a feeling this was going to be a close match, and it absolutely was. Busan went 2-0 for Seoul, but then on Hanamura it was 3-2 for Valiant, which gave them some extra confidence after their 4-0 loss yesterday. On Kings Row, both teams capped third and they had another chance to push the cart, but unfortunately Valiant got first held while Seoul pushed it all the way again for a 6-3 victory. At this point I was afraid the Dynasty was going to be able to close out the series, but Valiant made it interesting and won 3-2 on Junkertown to force a game 5. After each team won a round on Oasis, it came down to the wire, but Seoul was barely able to edge it out for the victory 3-2. Overall, I definitely liked what I saw from the Valiant. As a team I've been saying for so long is so good, but they just can't seem to get wins, I'm really happy they were able to get to 3-2 against Seoul. They seem to go 3-2 with a lot of teams, but Seoul is a really strong team right now, so I think they did really well. With so many players on the team with such high potential, the problem has to be something to do with teamwork and coordination, which luckily for them can only get better as the season goes on. On the Seoul side of the spectrum, Michelle played really well, Fitz did well, and so did Ryu Jehong. The Dynasty are looking at having a good chance of making the playoffs this stage, and I'm super happy about that. And then of course we ended the week off with the battle for Texas in Texas, the Houston Outlaws versus the Dallas Fuel. And even though they were in Texas, Houston was still technically the visiting team, while Dallas was at home and the crowd was definitely behind them. After the first map on Lijiang Tower, Dallas Fuel won 2-0. AKM flashed the camera a 4-0 sign, and I was like, oh no, please no 4-0. Please, Houston, don't let that happen. And they didn't. They won Temple of Anubis 2-1. That's right, they didn't get first held. They won 2-1. So now it was a match. And man, did the Outlaws give it everything they've got. Kings Row went 3-2, but it was very, very close. And then going into Wash Point, it was one of the most back and forth matches we've had all season. 1 minute you thought Dallas was going to close it out, but then the next minute you thought Houston had a chance to take it to game 5. It was absolutely crazy, but in the end, Dallas Fuel won 4-3 and ended the series 3-1. All in all, the implications of this game are much more than you might expect. Houston really seemed to be coming into their own in this match, even though they did end up losing. If you're an Outlaws fan, you should definitely be happy about this performance, especially from the tank players like Muma, Spree, and Coolmat. And if you're a Fuel fan, you should definitely be happy about this, because for the first time ever, Dallas Fuel defeated the Houston Outlaws. Just like in the last match, all the Fuel players absolutely popped off. The home court advantage is real in Overwatch, I gotta say. Let's hope that, like Heroes, the hype will never die and every home game will be like this for the seasons to come. And now, as always, I'll be doing my predictions for this week in the Overwatch League. Only 3 matches on Thursday and Friday, with 4 matches still on Saturday and Sunday. Fresh off the plane from Texas, Dallas Fuel is playing in the first match against the Florida Mayhem. Riding on the adrenaline from last weekend, I think Dallas Fuel takes it 4-0. 0. Then it's the Philadelphia Fusion versus the San Francisco Shock. Philly needs this win if they want to have playoff contention, but they're not going to get it. They're going to lose 3-1. Then we have the Guangzhou Charge versus the Houston Outlaws. Like I said, the Houston Outlaws do look better, so I think they actually do have a shot. It's going to be a close one, but Guangzhou's probably going to take it 3-2. Next up is Boston Uprising versus LA Gladiators. Gladiators are powerhouses in the league right now, and as much as I want Boston to win, I think Gladiators will win 3-1. Then it's Toronto Defiant versus Vancouver Titans. Toronto needs a 4-0 here if they want to have a chance at the playoffs, and as much as I would love to see that, I think it's going to go in the opposite direction, 4-0 Vancouver. Next up is the Shanghai Dragons versus the Washington Justice. Washington could make it interesting, but I think Shanghai's going to take it 3-1. Then we have the London Spitfire versus the Houston Outlaws. I think the loss to Chengdu was a fluke, and London will come back with a vengeance and take the win 3-1. Then we've got a rematch between the Atlanta Reign and the New York Excelsior. This one is going to be interesting because obviously we all know Atlanta beat New York last week, but can they do it again? I honestly don't think so. I've talked about it in the comments before. I don't like when two teams play each other in the same stage like this. The main reason is that normally the outcome isn't going to change, but in this case, it's kind of taking away from Atlanta's win to then have to play against New York again only to lose. Not saying they're definitely going to lose, but I feel like it's going to go 3-1 for New York. Then we have the Seoul Dynasty versus the Vancouver Titans, and this is actually pretty interesting because I think Seoul has a decent shot at taking out Vancouver. They've been playing extremely well with Marvel and Fitz on the tank line, and I don't know, the Titans might get a little complacent, especially with playoffs right around the corner. They've already clinched, they don't have anything to worry about, they might slack off, you never know, it could happen. 3-2 Seoul. Then the Chengdu Hunters face off against the LA Valiant, and this I'm hoping is another stepping stone for Valiant to take off on. It's gonna be tough of course because Chengdu is Chengdu, but I think they could end up taking the victory 3-2. Then we have the Toronto Defiant versus the Paris Eternal. I'm expecting this to be a super hype match because both of these teams are very close in terms of standings. When it comes down to it though, I think Toronto Defiant is a little better and they're going to take the win 3-2. Then we have the Washington Justice versus the Boston Uprising. Even though Boston is a 6-6 team, I haven't seen enough from Washington to prove that they'll be able to upset them, so I'm going 3-1 for Uprising. After that, it's the Shanghai Dragons versus the San Francisco Shock. Let's not kid ourselves here, it's going to be Shock 4-0. Then we end off the stage with probably the hypest match of the week, the Seoul Dynasty versus the Hangzhou Spark. This one could honestly go either way, and I really am not sure what to predict here. Seoul has been doing really well all stage, but Hangzhou is on the up and up. I don't know, but I'm going to go with my gut and say 3-2 Seoul Dynasty. And that does it for the recap and the predictions. Thanks so much for watching. If you're part of the Tang Gang, thanks for sticking around. If you're not, be sure to subscribe and join up. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it, it really does help me out, and comment below with what teams you think are going to make the Stage 2 playoffs. That's all I got for now, so until we meet again, later people!